At least 5 years of data is collected. Campaigner Claire Mercer, whose husband was killed on a smart motorway, told GB News she isn't impressed with the new proposals.
They could have easily just flicked a switch and turned the first lane off while they investigate smart motorways for the 25th time in the last 2.5 years. Just pause it. All they've actually promised to do is pause the rollout of new smart motorways, but it's not even all just new smart motorways. It's only ones that aren't substantially completed. So we're still going to have smart motorways opening in the next few years.
Novak Djokovic has admitted breaking COVID isolation rules when he met a journalist after testing positive for the infection. He says he made an error of judgment, saying he wanted to fulfil the long-standing commitment he had with a reporter. It's as the Australian government is considering whether to deport him following a row over his visa and vaccination status. The world's #1 player blamed a member of his team for what he called a human error in his travel documents. 500 former teachers have signed up with supply agencies as part of a national effort to tackle staffing shortages. Data from the Department of Education shows hundreds of former staff have responded to the call from the Education Secretary to temporarily return to the profession. At the start of the term this year, 1 in 12 teachers were absent. Unions say the return of former staff is welcome, but it isn't enough to tackle the challenge caused by the Omicron variant of coronavirus. Meanwhile, a leading health expert says the UK is closer than any other country towards the end of the pandemic. Professor David Heyman, a former chair of Public Health England, says population immunity appears to be preventing COVID from causing severe disease. Data from the Office for National Statistics show more than 90% of adults across the UK have COVID-19 antibodies. Parents are being warned to be extra vigilant for signs of a common winter illness in children called RSV. Charity, the British Lung Foundation, say that respiratory bug is rife due to lowered immunity in the population. They say it's responsible for around 20,000 hospital admissions every year for children under 1. Symptoms are similar to the common cold, but there can be issues with breathing. Now, in international news, NATO will hold talks with Russia in Brussels later in an effort to defuse tensions over Ukraine. Moscow has amassed around 100,000 troops on the border with its neighbour. The Kremlin, though, has denied allegations that it's planning to invade the country. NATO officials have suggested they are ready to engage in discussions over a number of issues, but have warned that some of the demands from Russia are unacceptable. The artistic director at the English National Ballet is stepping down after nearly a decade in the job. Tamara Rojo says she's leaving the extraordinary company later this year to become the artistic director of the San Francisco Ballet. Since taking up the role in 2012, she aimed to demystify the art form of ballet. You are up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more news as it happens. Now let's go to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Falarin-Iman and Patrick Christys on your TV and your radio. We've got a show over the next 2 hours, all the big discussions and the big stories that you care about. So here's what's on the menu.
Yes, it really is a big show today, ladies and gentlemen. The Prime Minister's future obviously hangs in the balance as his own MPs turn on him over partygate and he prepares for a PMQ showdown. But what we really want to know, right, is what you would like to ask the Prime Minister, obviously, if you have the chance at PMQs, but also why on earth the police in Downing Street let these parties happen. We'll be speaking to a copper about that.
Yes, absolutely. Get in touch. Well, Cambridge University has scrapped its prison rehabilitation scheme. This is the same programme that allowed Usman Khan to kill Jack Merritt and Saskia Jones. The inquest highlighted that the terrorist was seen as a poster boy for the rehab programme and who was seen as a key role in it and a, quote, collective failure to stop him going on to kill.
Yes, really sad stuff. And ministers have put the brakes on the rollout of smart motorways amid safety fears. Is this the right call? Do you feel safe on smart motorways? We'll be speaking to a woman whose husband was sadly killed on one quite recently.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme, so please get in touch with your views, GBviews at GBnews as usual. But first, Patrick gives his views on the grooming gangs in the UK.
The Pakistani and other South Asian men responsible for the endemic grooming gang scandals right across the UK have no respect for vulnerable young white girls, and it appears neither do our police. Political correctness is getting in the way of justice for the thousands and thousands of children who are being systematically abused on an industrial scale. This has actually been officially acknowledged now by our government. Priti Patel said, "Victims of sickening sexual grooming gangs have been failed by the state for decades in the name of political correctness. It remains one of the biggest stains on our country's conscience." And it's emerged now as well that South Yorkshire Police is still not routinely recording the ethnicity of child sex abusers, some of them anyway. Rotherham, for example, where hundreds were abused by gangs of South Asian men, they omitted suspect ethnicity in 67% of cases. Why is that? Is it because they wouldn't want to stoke racial tensions, perhaps? They wouldn't want to drive a wedge through the local community? Well, instead of caring about the sensibilities of the offenders, why don't they care more about the feelings of those vulnerable young girls who are having their lives ruined and their futures stolen by these vile thugs? In November, an independent Office for Police Conduct investigation into the J report found that many instances existed where crimes were not recorded when they should have been, including reports of sexual assault or sexual activity with a child. But it's not just that police forces aren't doing enough to stop children being abused. They're letting these victims down again, even after their attackers have been convicted. There have been numerous cases of victims bumping into their abusers in their local town. They're not being informed that their attacker has been released from prison, let alone back into the same area where the abuse took place. That shows a fundamental lack of care for these victims. All it would take is a phone call or a quick knock on the door. I mean, when you think about it, these victims are being let down from start to finish. The government's rape review showed that victims are not reporting crimes for fear of being let down by the criminal justice process, not being believed, being blamed even, for example, and having to, of course, relive the traumatic process, only to see the prosecution collapse. And sadly, it seems these victims are right. Take the case of some of the Rochdale grooming members. Adil Khan and Kwari Ralph were jailed in 2012 for running a child sexual exploitation ring. Khan got just 8 years, but of course, naturally, was released out on licence in 4. Ralph got 6 years, but was out in just 2.5. In order to be considered for parole, an offender must be seen as no further risk to the public and show remorse. Well, at a court appearance, Khan actually said, and I'm quoting now, "We have not committed that big a crime." That doesn't sound particularly remorseful to me. And if he thinks getting a 13-year-old girl pregnant isn't that big of a crime, then I'd suggest that he still poses a threat to the community. He even had the gall to say that he was being treated badly by this country. He complained that he was being forced to, get this, live off his son's benefits. I mean, that says it all really, doesn't it? Ralph is claiming that he can't be deported because that would make him stateless. He's renounced his Pakistani citizenship. Oh, well, I'm sure there's a rock in the middle of the ocean somewhere that he can live out the rest of his days, don't you? It's time to get our priorities straight in this country. Political correctness should have no place in policing. Any moment spent, any single moment spent by police worrying about the racial sensibilities of those suspected of being involved in child grooming is a moment wasted. It's a moment that could be spent bringing them to justice. It's the vulnerable young working-class victims who need to be the priority, and nobody else. Yeah, this problem has been going on for decades and it's not going away, and it appears as though, yet again, it's just burying heads in sand territory, for me anyway.
No, I think many people will agree with you. I mean, one thing that I would say is that I think when it comes to policing and the criminal justice system, it does look like they're failing victims of sexual abuse across the board. We see this with other types of sex crimes that, the conviction rate is incredibly low. Lots of young girls and women report that they just don't feel comfortable going to the police because they just don't feel that they're going to be treated fairly. And I think there's absolutely a problem in the grooming gang case in relation to South Asian men with young working class white girls. But I also often wonder about many, South Asian girls, that are victims of sexual abuse, but there are issues within kind of speaking out in the community, stigma, shame, and the kinds of silencing behaviours that do also go on within communities themselves. So I think that this is an issue across the board, and I think there is undoubtedly a cultural and racial element, but I also think that a lot of ethnic minority young girls are often scared to speak up against people in their own families and communities too.
No, absolutely. I think if we scratch the surface there, goodness gracious me, I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about what you'd find. But But anyway, well, look, we're sticking with this theme, as it were, I suppose. A gang of 6 men have been charged with a total of 24 sex offences against 8 girls who were under the age of 16 in Redditch. Now, all suspects are in their 20s, and there's alleged sex offences anyway, including sexual assault, rape and sexual activity with a child, go back almost 10 years.
Yes, well, the trial continues and we'll bring you all of the latest as the proceedings go on with more details. But to talk to us more broadly about grooming gangs and what can be done to better protect young girls is Maggie Oliver, a former police officer and founder of the Maggie Oliver Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Maggie. I mean, this has been an issue that people have been speaking about, raising for decades now, and we continue to see more and more cases be investigated and many cases still happening ongoing. Why is this something that just does not seem to be being tackled strong enough?
Good morning. As many of your listeners will know, that this has become my life for the past 10 years because I resigned about the way that the Rochdale case was handled. And Patrick, you've just hit one of the nails on the head with Adil Khan. You know, he got a 13-year-old child pregnant, and yet he wasn't charged with rape. He was out of prison in less than 4 years. And you know, this recent case shows that very little has actually changed. I'm not going to talk about this case because it is a live case, but it's already been reported that the barrister in his opening speech said that some of the girls had made poor lifestyle choices, that they'd been drinking, taking drugs and being sexually available. That is a barrister who is in a court, and immediately you see the attitudes towards these children which has prevailed through so many cases and so many forces. My work now is with the Maggie Oliver Foundation, which I set up because I was overwhelmed with requests for help from victims of not just grooming gangs, but of sexual abuse in general. And in the last 3 months alone, the foundation has found that 60% of those survivors who have contacted us have been threatened with arrest. They've been actually arrested. They've been threatened with being sectioned. They've been blamed for their own abuse. We've got an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old now who were approached, groomed, threatened, coerced by a gang of men. The police turned up, and the opening comments to those children with their parents there was, "You do know that you have committed criminal offences by sending these photographs online." That is the problem. The abuse is kind of being weaponized, and it means that victims are frightened to speak out. The reality is that we need to get a grip of this in this country. I mean, Priti Patel has now said that police forces are going to record the ethnicity of the. You know, I had a meeting with Priti Patel over a year ago in which we said this wasn't happening. But at the foundation now, we are collecting our own data, our own material. And my opinion is that without knowledge, you cannot take action. And we need the evidence and the statistics in order to address the problem.
Yeah, Maggie, is political correctness getting in the way here at all, do we think?
I think it's been the elephant in the room for too long. I'm by no means racist, not in any shape or form. You know, whether it's Jimmy Savile or whether it's, Harvey Weinstein or Jeffrey Epstein, I don't care. A man who abuses and rapes a child is a paedophile, and they need to be addressed. But the reality is that in the grooming gang scandal, the vast majority of the abusers are Pakistani Muslim men. And by tiptoeing around that reality, we are failing the victims. And it's an uncomfortable truth. But I would like the conversation to open up with that community. I want to know why that is not being talked about. Why is everybody frightened of having that conversation? We need to educate the children. We need to understand why that is the case. And only by understanding can we address it. And if we don't address it, Patrick, we are failing further generations of children who are going to be abused. They need to know the dangers in school very early on, actually. But as a country, we need to look into this problem and address it. And I would like the community itself to be leading that debate. I would like that conversation to be opened up widely and understand what it is that makes this continue to be a problem in our country.
And just continuing on with that that point in terms of what we do to actually resolve this. What can we do? You mentioned, the community leading, but in terms of just as a society, what practically can we do? Because as you mentioned, this seems to be something even on an institutional level, failings going on.
Well, I would say for any victims who are struggling to be heard or families, come to the foundation, come to the Maggie Oliver Foundation. We will advocate for you. We are gathering the evidence, and with evidence comes more influence, more power and more pressure to change. But I also believe that the criminal justice system itself is broken. When you have a barrister blaming children, he is confirming the bias in the system. I think we need expert witnesses in court for every single case that involves abuse, grooming gangs particularly, to explain the trauma that victims go through. That isn't the case. These victims stand in court all on their own with nobody to fight their corner. Policing, that case I've just told you about, those victims shouldn't have to come to us to say we have been abused. The police should be going in there and taking a grip of it. And we are actually making inroads with several police forces now, asking them to change their processes. So there's a long way to go.
Yeah, now you're in Greater Manchester. I'm from Greater Manchester, really. I'm just outside anyway. And I know all too well what a fantastically diverse, multicultural area that is, right? And in some areas, South Yorkshire could be, I think, well, it will be, I'll throw it into the mix anyway. It's another very diverse area. And one of the reasons why I wonder whether or not police are slow to, or indeed don't record ethnicity or certainly publicise this, or perhaps don't necessarily always really go after this issue as much as they could, is because they're afraid, potentially, in their minds, of stoking racial tensions or appearing racist, for example. Do you think that it actually would cause racial tensions in an area if they really went after these issues as much as they possibly could, if they really exposed, potentially, some of the true demographics behind this?
No, I don't. I really don't, Patrick, because the vast majority of people within those communities are decent, law-abiding citizens who live by the same laws as everybody else. It is a minority in those communities. Just like if somebody accuses Jimmy Savile of being an abuser, or a priest in the Catholic Church. They might be white, but I would not condone that under any circumstances. And the principles are exactly the same. We cannot avoid, we can't avoid child abuse where it occurs. And for far too long, I remember Anne Cryer going on about this in the 1990s. And when you look at the case that's being reported now, or the Rochdale case 10 years ago, you have to question, have we moved on? We definitely haven't moved on enough. That is absolutely the case. We need to target the offenders. We need to understand the reasoning behind that offending. We need to protect the children. We need to support the families who are calling for help. And at the moment, that is happening. It is not happening in enough cases. And that is where we need to be focusing our attention and not be frightened of political correctness, because without addressing those facts, we are failing children, and we're allowing this abuse to continue for further generations, and it destroys lives, Patrick. These children often never recover. They come to the foundation for further support maybe 20, 30 years later, because their lives have been destroyed by them blaming themselves because they feel that the authorities have blamed them as well. It needs to be got a grip of and addressed.
Look, we need more Maggie Olivers in this world. That's a fact. So thank you very much, Maggie. Really appreciate you making the time for us and keeping up the vital work that you do, and being brave enough as well to just frankly come out and tell the truth. Maggie Oliver there, of the Maggie Oliver Foundation. Thank you very much.
I think Maggie is completely right. I actually think that the inability to talk about this issue frankly and tackle it is what causes racial tension. I think any decent human being would find it abhorrent to find out some of the sickening things that we hear in these grooming gang cases.
No, I agree. Yeah, sweeping something under the carpet very rarely makes it better.
No, exactly. It makes it worse, it festers, and people start to have resentment within society. Indeed. Right, well, look, after the break, we discuss what's on all of the front pages. Of course we do. Downing Street lockdown parties. I know, ladies and gentlemen, we can't ignore it. Will Boris finally admit that he was there? That's all after the weather.
Hello, good morning. A reversal of fortunes for many of us this morning, stepping out the door. Much colder in the south with frost and fog, milder and windier in the far north. That's where we're on the periphery of a large area of high pressure, tightly packed isobars across Scotland and Northern Ireland, Northern England, so breezier here with some cloud and outbreaks of rain. But under the high pressure for much of England and Wales, clear skies overnight, and of course that's led to frost and fog. Some dense fog around. Watch out if you're on the roads first thing. The fog will come and go, I think, but where it does occur, it will be fairly dense with poor visibility. Nevertheless, it lifts through the morning. Plenty of sunshine then for England and Wales. Maybe eastern Scotland, southern Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland seeing some brighter skies. But in the far northwest, it's dull, it's damp. It's also windy, but mild, 10 or 11 Celsius. Lower temperatures further south, but with light winds and sunny skies, well, it's going to feel a bit more pleasant, I think. And then quite quickly, those temperatures drop away this evening. And for the early hours of Thursday, fog quickly reforming. This time, perhaps a bit more extensive and certainly a frosty night to come for a large part of England and Wales. But it stays cloudy and milder for Scotland, Northern Ireland, the far north of England. Again, breezy and damp for the far north and northwest, whilst it starts off with some sunshine for much of England and Wales, but certainly those dense fog patches about first thing. And some fog patches could continue into the afternoon. Where that occurs, it will continue to feel cold. Otherwise, sunny spells and decent bright conditions across a large part of England, Wales, eastern and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland. Temperatures 5 to 8 Celsius, a bit colder compared to today. And the cooling trend, as well as the foggy trend, continues on Friday and into the weekend. More widespread and longer-lasting fog for large parts of England and Wales, whilst it stays cloudier and breezier for Scotland and Northern Ireland.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Morning, it's 10:26. Now, this is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys, and Inaya Folarin. Iman, right here on GB News, on your TV and on your radio this morning, so you can take us with you wherever you go.
Yes, big news today. Boris Johnson is set to face quite a heated session of Prime Minister's questions this afternoon amid demands for him to say whether he attended a drinks event in the Downing Street garden party during lockdown. Despite the allegations that he, his wife and 40 others socialised in the number 10 garden, Government Minister Michael Ellis says Boris Johnson is going nowhere.
The Prime Minister's going nowhere. He seeks to draw me into making a supposition about the result of any inquiry. But the Prime Minister retains the confidence of the people of this country, and he did so 2 years ago with the biggest majority in decades.
Right, now, I was thinking that a lot of you seem to be quite sick and tired of this particular story, whether or not Boris Johnson got smashed in his own back garden. A lot of you are still very bothered about it, but I thought, hang on a minute, is there not something else going on here? Because the Metropolitan Police are actually facing calls now, aren't they, to abandon their policy of not retrospectively investigating alleged COVID breaches. This is amid warnings that this policy is, frankly, losing the public's trust in policing. After all, 800 people were fined for breach of COVID rules in the same week that this garden party allegedly took place. I also want to know, why did the police let it happen? There's police officers everywhere around Downing Street. Why did they allow it to happen?
Well, Kevin Hurley is a former Met Area Commander and counter-terrorism consultant. Thank you for joining us this morning, Kevin. Is it at all possible that the Met were unaware of this party happening, given that there are so many police officers in the area guarding number 10?
Well, I think not at all. You're right. I actually started my policing career, believe it or not, as being forced for having too much to say, actually, to the sergeant, to stand at the end of Downing Street checking passes, so I know where all the posts are around Downing Street, or where they were, and the new ones. What you've got is constables outside, of course, who will know what was people going in and out. There's a constable round the back and a couple of others round the back. And you will have the protection officers of various ministers. The problem is they're all relatively junior, and I think they would all be concerned after the Damien Green saga, where the Conservative Party fell out badly with the Metropolitan Police, and, of course, the Mitchell saga, where Mitchell, in fact, lost at the civil court. Junior officers are wary about using their powers or speaking out, partly because if they end up upsetting someone with power in the Cabinet Office or someone within the Cabinet, they could end up being moved off to a much less easy job, quite honestly, because that's a nice little number for those officers who wish to be conflict dodgers and really stand on that particular job.
Yeah, so really, the implication there is, whether or not this is the case, it's maybe the way that it looks, is that some police officers there at Downing Street turned a blind eye because they've got quite a cushy gig.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I would say that that's been a little unkind to them in terms of the fact that if they had strong support behind them, inspector, superintendent, commander level, actually being on call and saying, look, Boris, or frankly, Boris is misbehaving again, because let's face it, he does all sorts of things that are potentially breaching regulations, who would then be prepared to intervene. They might feel perhaps they'll step up to the plate. But on the point of investigating, I think we've got to be careful here that the Metropolitan Police don't end up being dragged into being, if you like, the political referee between people who are understandably howling for the Prime Minister to step aside and people on the other side saying he shouldn't. In my view, because Metropolitan Police officers may not have actually tried to stop that party or warned against it, I think an outside police force should investigate. Now, the problem you've got is every single police force now is effectively politically controlled by a police and crime commissioner. Most of them are Conservative. So again, the quality of that investigation should be tainted. In my view, the external investigation should be done by a police force that is not politically controlled in that way. Either the British Transport Police, who report to a separate authority, or perhaps the City of London Police, who do not have a politicised governance organisation above them.
And this is perhaps a political question that I'm about to ask you, but we know that in that same month where this alleged party went on, 800 people were fined for breaching COVID rules. I mean, what are your thoughts, and potentially as a kind of counterpoint to what's going on, actually just getting rid of those fines or even refunding all of those people to show that actually what happened, and actually maybe the fines were potentially just out of order?
Well, I think given that what we were talking about, 150,000 dead, through people who still refuse to follow regulations or did at that period. I sit on the very hard edge of enforcement and hard edge of punishment for people who risk, for selfish reasons or disbelief in science, spreading the virus. However, I think where we should be looking at, if we're getting poor leadership, which it appears to be the case from senior civil servants, even the Prime Minister, we should be looking in that direction, because I've seen the photograph of him sat in the garden with his wife and a couple of other people and a group of others, 19 in the back garden. You know, if it looks like it, smells like it, tastes like it, it pretty much looks like a breach of the regulations, which it defies belief to think the Prime Minister did not know that his staff were doing that, or indeed, was it right that they were sat in the back garden? Of course, there is a problem, but it's also his private dwelling house, so you would at that time have been allowed to have a couple of people in your garden for a gathering. But I think it comes down to the question of this. The public should know what went on. I think there is an independent investigation going on at the moment with a very senior civil servant. Once that report's back, if there is the slightest sniff of a regulation breach, my own view is this should go for further investigation by the police, not by the Metropolitan Police, because they are not independent in this for the reasons I've outlined, nor should it go to a provincial county force, which has got a political elected police and crime commissioner.
I'm very sorry. We could talk to you all day. Don't get me wrong. We'll have to have you back on very soon. We've got to go over to the news, I'm afraid. But Kevin, thank you very much for joining us all the way from East Africa as well. Which, I hope the weather's nice over there. Anyway. Kevin Hurley, former Met Area Commander, terrorism consultant, and what we got
after the break? The Cambridge University backed prison rehabilitation scheme exploited by the London Bridge terrorists is set to be scrapped. We'll bring you more on that just after the headlines.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date at 10:33 here on GB News. Now, Boris Johnson will face MPs in the Commons later as pressure grows for him to say whether he attended a drinks event in the Downing Street garden during lockdown. It's going to be the Prime Minister's first public appearance since an email his private secretary sent in the first lockdown inviting 100 staff to a bring your own booze gathering. That email was made public. Well, Sir Keir Starmer will return to the Commons today after finishing his COVID isolation to face Boris Johnson in the Commons. Novak Djokovic has admitted breaking COVID isolation rules when he met a journalist after testing positive for the virus. The tennis star says he made an error of judgment when he chose to fulfil the long-standing meeting with a reporter. It has the Australian government consider whether to deport him following a row over his visa and his vaccination status. The world number one blamed a member of his team for what he called a human error in his travel documents. The rollout of smart motorways in England, which uses the hard shoulder as a lane for traffic, has been suspended over safety concerns. The Department for Transport say it's taken the decision following several fatal crashes. New projects will be put on hold until at least 5 years of data is collected. 500 former teachers have signed up with supply agencies as part of a national effort to tackle staffing shortages. Data from the Department for Education shows hundreds of former staff have responded to the call from the Education Secretary to temporarily return to the profession. At the beginning of term this year, 1 in 12 teachers were absent. The Prince of Wales has commissioned a series of paintings of Britain's last remaining Holocaust survivors. 7 leading artists will paint the men and women who were once children in concentration camps in the Second World War. The Prince says he hopes the portraits will be a lasting reminder of the horrors of the Nazi regime when it's lost to living memory. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll have more for you at 11 o'clock.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
And Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Morning everyone, it's 10:37. This is To The Point with Inaya Folarin-Iman and me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. We're live on your telly and on your radio as well.
Yes, well, a serving Metropolitan Police officer accused of a string of sexual offences has appeared in court to face a further 9 charges.
Gosh, well, let's talk to our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, who joins us now from Westminster Magistrates Court. Bring us up to date, please, Mark.
Yeah, this is 47-year-old police constable David Carrick. Now, he was originally charged with 1 count of rape against a woman and appeared in court in October of last year. Then last month, he appeared at St Albans Crown Court facing 20 charges of sex offences, including rape, against 4 women. Well, today, a further 9 charges were laid before the court, and that means that this officer is facing a total of 29 charges, including 13 counts of rape against 8 women. Now, he appeared in court via a video link from Belmarsh Prison, wearing a grey suit and tie and a COVID face mask. He spoke only to confirm his name, his address in Stevenage, and also his date of birth. The court heard that he will be appearing again at St Albans Crown Court to face these charges on the 28th of this month. Now, this officer is attached to the Met's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command. He's a firearms officer in the same unit that housed PC Wayne Couzens, of course, who you remember was jailed for a whole life term last year for the kidnap, rape and murder of Sarah Everard. Now, we should say that the charges that this officer is facing are unrelated to the charges facing PC Wayne Couzens. The officer is currently suspended pending the outcome of these court proceedings.
Thank you very much for bringing us that update, Mark White, our Home and Security Editor. Now, also, Cambridge University has scrapped its prison rehabilitation scheme that was used and abused by the London Bridge terrorists, with co-directors reiterating their profound grief and deep and ongoing trauma over the incident.
Yeah, well, Usman Khan, who's 28 years old at the time, convinced staff, I'm sure you'll remember this, he convinced staff that he'd changed for the better, changed for good. He was fully rehabilitated. And he'd been serving, of course, 16 years for being part of a terror plot to blow up the London Stock Exchange. But thanks to the programme, he was released in 2018 after serving just half of it. As I'm sure you all remember again, he went on to kill Jack Merritt and Saskia Jones in 2019.
Well, so is there any hope for terrorist reform or rehabilitation? Joining us now is Dr. Alan Mendoza, co-founder and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, to discuss this, and he is also a terror and radicalisation expert. Thank you, Dr. Mendoza, for joining us. I mean, do you think that terrorists can be rehabilitated? Obviously, this case with regard to the London Bridge, it does counter that, but perhaps he is just one case out of maybe hundreds of people that have actually been successfully rehabilitated.
Well, you can't generalise. I think that's the most important thing to say. It's certainly possible for some people in jail for terrorist offences to be rehabilitated, but there's also considerable evidence to suggest that others will not be. I think the mistake is to look at this as a whole class action problem. The reality is certain individuals, for whatever reason, are tougher nuts to crack than others. Certain people are more steeped in ideological sort of beliefs in others. And the deeper the ideology is, the more you inherently believe in it, the tougher it is to de-radicalize you as a result. So I think you've got to move away from this whole sort of, we must try X and Y on everyone, and instead have a much more psychological approach to this and go, actually, we can see the possibilities with these terrorists, but not so much with these, and then you deal with them accordingly as a result.
But we know that, global Islamist jihadist terror is a multi-pronged problem. It's an ideology. It's a, militarized movement. I mean, it seems that we would need a equally multifaceted response to actually counter this quite destructive ideology.
Well, I think certainly the Learning Together program was not the way to handle that. Although it is notable that Usman Khan managed to fool a lot of people along the way because he presumably wasn't probed hard enough about what his true views were. So I think, of course, you need a multi-pronged approach. You need to, develop a psychological approach. You've got to develop a sort of rational approach. There are all sorts of things you have to go to. But I think the key to this as well is regular verification along the way that what you're doing is working. And that involves obviously enhanced techniques for working out whether the person sitting opposite you and claiming that they are de-radicalized actually are, or whether they are simply saying it in a bid to distract attention from what they might like to do once they've left prison.
It's a very tough one, though, isn't it? Because if there's any risk whatsoever, and what Usman Khan showed was that it is possible to fool a large number of people, and it is possible, therefore, as well, to use that freedom to kill other people, right? And if there's any chance whatsoever that that might happen, it's going to be a very hard thing to justify, really, assuming that anyone could be allowed out early through some kind of de-radicalisation process. I'm sure the victims of any family that may go on, to suffer trauma as a result of that would be asking some serious questions of the people that released them.
Oh, absolutely. And I think in the case of Usman Khan, look, he went down for 16 years. He was released halfway through that sentence, which was a disgrace. But the reality is someone who's gone down for a crime that brings you a 16-year tariff tells you that they are pretty steeped in what they were doing, basically. And I don't think someone like Usman Khan was ever going to be effectively de-radicalized in prison, given he was sufficiently radicalized to plot a mass casualty atrocity. So it seems that sort of level is unlikely. I was, thinking more of the lower end of this, the accomplices, the people who might have been, kind of influenced by others to go into this setup without necessarily having the true believer status that someone like Khan did. And clearly, if there is any doubt in this process along the way, just as if there is any doubt about whether someone remains a danger to the public, they need to stay in prison and not be released. That much is clear, not simply from this case, but from others that we've seen as well.
If you wouldn't mind just filling our viewers in, if you know anything in particular about this specific de-radicalisation programme, I suppose. You mentioned that it was obviously not the way to go. I mean, the results would suggest that, unfortunately. But what actual practical things are done? How do they go about de-radicalising someone?
Well, there's all sorts of different methods of doing this. So, it's impossible, again, to generalize. But, one example, let's say, bring someone in to talk to you. If you're a prisoner, they bring someone in, a theologian, imam. It could be someone else who knows something. And they just debate views with you. They start to discuss, and it becomes a sort of relationship that you develop, with somebody specifically. And the aim is to try and get you to reconsider your views and to try and get into your head, if you like. And much of this is a headspace argument, basically. It's about, can you get sufficiently into the person's head to break away from this ideological approach that's been taken, from the ideology that's become rooted in them? Can you get them to see the light? Can you get them to take them from a position where they think that God has commanded them to do this to a position where they accept that God has not commanded them to do this, basically? That's the essential line that you're trying to do. And, there are, again, like numerous tactics to try and do that. It's a lot about peer pressure. It's a lot about bringing, again, the externalities in to have those debates. It's about other forms of education as well. But ultimately, it's about whether the person is willing to receive that instruction. We've had examples, of course. Anjem Choudhury, said he went to prison. He laughed at the de-radicalisation attempt. Someone came to chat to him and he was like, most fun I've had for ages, basically. No interest at all. If the person has no interest like that, you're not going to get very far.
No. And finally, Dr. Mendoza, I mean, this allowed his sentence to be halved, effectively. I mean, that is quite a significant thing for somebody that had made plots that potentially could have killed several people. I mean, the authorities must have a lot of faith in these programmes if they're willing to let people actually have their sentences significantly reduced for going on them.
Well, don't forget that's all changed in the sense that the minimum period has now gone up for crimes like terrorism as a result of this and other mistakes that have been made. So there is considerably less faith, shall we just say, in programmes like this. I think, obviously, at Cambridge University, once the coroner's verdict had sort of damned their trust in Usman Khan, they decided the sensible thing to do was not to allow a repeat of this and shut the programme down. And I think that reminds everyone, frankly, that the authorities have to take a dim view rather than a generous view of what people are telling them in this process, whether it is through an organised programme or whether it is just from one-on-one discussions with the criminal themselves. So I think we've seen a considerable rise in scepticism about these programmes, sadly based on people having been killed as a result of these mistakes having been made.
All right, well, look, Dr. Ali Mendoza, thank you very much, as always, for taking the time to join us right here on To The Point, co-founder and executive director of the Henry Jackson Society, and, of course, crucially, a terror and radicalisation expert. I was just whizzing you through there the news that, that de-radicalisation programme that Usman Khan managed to fool the world with before he went on his killing spree, that has been stopped.
I think you made a very good point, Patrick. I mean, what is actually done on these programmes? You're just having a discussion, talking to them. I mean, this is a terrorist, radical jihadist ideology, dead set on killing thousands of people. It's a death cult. What kind of conversations are being had? It really
in the name of a higher power as well, and that's always going to be your problem, isn't it? If the people do not care for their time on this earth, frankly, and they are, as you've rightly said, they're part of a death cult, trying to get in their head or telling them that anything is more important than that belief of some kind of higher being is going to be a very, very tough battle. But anyway, moving away.
Well, the government is halting the rollout of any new smart motorways. Ministers announced the freeze of the controversial road scheme in evidence to the Transport Select Committee.
Well, our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Kevin Larkin, is by the M1. In fact, the last time I spoke to you, Kevin, I think was Christmas Day. You're on the M1 then as well. Anyway, you're in Rotherham for us now. He's never off a motorway, this lad. Give us all the details, please.
Patrick, well spotted. That's all I can say. So yes, the government has announced a halt to any new smart motorways, but this isn't the victory that campaigners were hoping for. Existing smart motorways will remain in place, although there will be more refuges added to the side as part of a £390 million upgrade, and those motorways which are still being constructed will be completed. Now, where I am now, I'm one junction down from the location in 2019 where Jason Mercer and Alexandru Murgano were killed in 2019. They'd had a minor collision, they'd stopped, they were exchanging insurance details for about 10 minutes, but the lane was kept open and a lorry driver came in and smashed into both their cars, killing both men. And yesterday, I spoke to Claire Mercer, Jason's widow, who has been campaigning to get rid of smart motorways.
For 2.5 years, Claire Mercer has been trying to stop smart motorways. Her husband Jason was killed, along with Alexandru Murgano, while they exchanged details after a minor collision, when a lorry went into their cars in a lane which was still open. Claire found out when 2 police officers showed up at her front door.
I said, "Is he alive?" And he said, "No, unfortunately not." And I fell to the floor and they had to pick me up and put me on the sofa. They asked me to identify Jason and I said, "If you've got my husband, you know he's very distinctive looking. He's got a Mohican, he's got a big piercing through his nose, he's tattooed from the ears down." And they said, "What does it say around his neck?" And I said, "It says truth be told." And they said, "I'm afraid it is Jason."
Lorry driver Premislaw Zuba was jailed in 2020 after admitting causing death by careless driving. Claire said at the time the wrong person was jailed. It's a view she still holds today.
I don't hold him remotely responsible. I walked up to him in the court and I said, "You didn't mean to do this." It was obviously very emotional, for both of us. It's ruined his life as well. They say that he didn't pay attention for something like 3.5 seconds longer than the average person. So they prosecuted him over 3.5 seconds. If they hadn't removed the hard shoulder, he would have been in an entirely separate lane to Jason and Alexandru, and 3.5 seconds wouldn't have made a blind bit of difference.
Today the government says it'll stop plans for any new smart motorways, but those being built will be completed and existing ones will stay open, but with more refuge areas. Claire Mercer has been campaigning for the full return of the hard shoulder, but the chair of the Transport Select Committee, Hugh Merriman, says that's not an easy option.
We can't just magic the hard shoulder back to a smart motorway. It would take a number of years to actually be delivered back. So the only way you could do that is to close stretches of our strategic and people's ability to get from A to B. You force them onto more dangerous A roads, B roads, where statistically, I'm afraid to say, you're more likely to have a fatality or a serious collision.
The government said in its conclusion to the committee today, the Transport Secretary is absolutely committed to making smart motorways as safe as possible. We are taking immediate steps to implement the actions we have set out in this response and will update the committee on progress over the coming year. But there's still only one option acceptable to Claire Mercer.
He needs to just turn the first lane off. It's a flick of a switch. It could be done in seconds.
Kevin Larkin for GB News in Rotherham.
Well, the government argued in its submission to the Transport Select Committee that smart motorways are in many cases actually safer from normal motorways. However, they have also conceded the point that more data needs to be gathered over the next few years to reach a definitive conclusion. But of course, people like Claire Mercer already know all too well about the safety of smart motorways as it's affected them. But that will be going forward, and Claire Mercer will of course be continuing her campaign to get them dropped altogether.
Kevin, thank you very much, as always. A fantastic report, that really highlighting a very, very important issue indeed. Kevin Larkin there reporting to us from the M1. I think it's fair to say it's time for something completely different now, isn't it?
Yes, a gold medal winning rat, never thought I'd say that, that helped hunt for landmines in the Cambodian countryside has unfortunately passed away. Magawa was a giant African pouched rat, giant African pouched rat who helped clear the equivalent of 42 football pitches of landmines after being trained to sniff them out. Well, congratulations.
Good effort, a life well lived. I think that's the thing. The thing is, of course, now I'm confronted with the reality that I'm nowhere near as good as a rat. I've achieved nothing compared to this rat. You know, he's cleared, what was it, 42 football pitches worth of landmines. I mean, the amount of lives saved, and I'll just sit here. You know?
Get a bit emotional.
Oh, anyway, so he was able to cover an area the size of a tennis court within just 30 minutes. Good lad. Something that would take 4 days using a conventional metal detector. Magawa retired in June last year, passed away peacefully at the weekend at the age of 8. That's quite old for a rat, isn't it, that?
Yeah, I mean, he won...
Especially a rat that sniffs out landmines. Flipping heck, yeah.
I mean, it is quite remarkable what animals can do. I mean, he won the animal equivalent of Britain's highest civilian honour for bravery.
This is just fantastic. Well,
Wow.
not dead, obviously, but it's fantastic. A life well lived, Magawa. Well done. I think we should have a plaque to Magawa somewhere.
I mean, because you've got guide dogs who do just amazing work with people that have visual impairments. You know, they do, dolphins give a lot of love and affection to people.
Well, talking about dolphins, apparently dolphins actually can detect if you're pregnant and certain types of cancer, but that may be just a myth my mum told me when I was younger. Moving on, we're talking about now still dolphins, actually. Yeah, that's right, Zionist dolphins, you heard. Palestinian terrorist organisation Hamas has claimed that its naval commanders were attacked by dolphins trained by Israeli security forces and equipped with specialist combat gear.
Wow, that is something.
Are they the Zionist dolphins, or are they just some dolphins? They're just some dolphins. There's no combat gear there, as far as you can see.
Well, I mean, dolphins are very intelligent. You know, they're one of the few sea life that actually are mammalian. You know, they bear children similar to human beings. They give sonar, which is a way of communicating.
I like a dolphin.
Oh, they're one of my favourite animals.
Yeah.
What's your favourite animal?
Or a duck-billed platypus. What do you mean off? What's ridiculous? Anyway, right.
I like a naked mole rat.
All right, well, okay. Enough about that. The exact nature and function of the alleged Zionist dolphin's combat gear has not yet been revealed by Hamas, but they did claim to capture a similar dolphin operative in 2015 after it was spotted making suspicious movements. The Russians apparently did also train beluga whales to, I think, was it like They could strap up, they could like nudge a bomb towards a boat. I don't know. Anyway, there we go. Zionist dolphins there.
Keep all your thoughts coming in GBviews at gbnews.uk. We'll have more on these top stories just after the break.
Hello. A sparkling day of winter sunshine for most parts of the UK. It is a little cloudier over northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. And tonight we will again see frost and fog patches forming. Big chunky area of high pressure has moved in, keeping the weather fronts well to the north. Notice though across Scotland the isobars are a little closer together, so it's quite windy here, and that wind is bringing a lot of cloud to western Scotland, patchy rain over the Highlands and the Northern Isles. A bit of cloud too for northwest England, Northern Ireland, but much of eastern England, the Midlands, Wales and the south, dry, fine and sunny. And after a cold and frosty start, temperatures ticking up to around average 7, 8, 9 Celsius. It is milder further north. We could reach 12 Celsius, say, in Aberdeenshire. But we'll keep the patchy rain going across the far northwest through the evening and overnight. Otherwise, it's dry. Clear skies in the south will allow a frost fairly quickly this evening to form, and then later in the night some dense patches of fog likely over the Midlands, South Wales and particularly parts of southern England. Patchy in nature, but nevertheless could be problematic first thing in the morning. Not so frosty further north, where we'll keep the breeze and we'll keep quite a lot of cloud. That cloud still providing some rain at times over the Highlands, but otherwise a dry day again to come tomorrow. Watch out for that fog in the morning across the south, patchy in nature, but could be quite dense. Should be out of the way by late morning, however, and then it's another generally fine and sunny day across the south. A bit more cloud further north, and again temperatures getting up to around average, maybe double digits in the southwest. Certainly again though mild in the far north, where we'll have again breezy and cloudy conditions with some patchy rain that'll continue into Thursday evening. And again we do the same with that frost forming quite quickly on Thursday evening, and if anything some thicker fog patches likely for Friday morning. So the next few days largely dry, some sunshine, some fog patches and cold mornings, especially so across the south. Bye for now.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Inaya Falarin Imam. We're on your TV and we're on your radio, and we're here all the way through until midday.
Make sure you get in touch with your views as usual, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting in touch with all of those throughout the show, but first, here's the latest news.
A very good morning. It's 1 minute past 11. I'm Rosie Wright here in the GB News newsroom. Let's get you up to date. Now, Boris Johnson is going to face MPs in the Commons at midday as pressure grows on him to say whether he attended a drinks event in the Number 10 garden during lockdown. It's going to be the Prime Minister's first public appearance since the leak of an email from his private secretary inviting Downing Street staff to a gathering in May 2020. Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, will return to Prime Minister's questions today after finishing his COVID isolation. The shadow Levelling Up Minister, Alex Norris, told GB News that Boris Johnson is in a precarious position.
Your viewers have missed funerals, they've missed the last days of their loved ones who have died, they've missed the weddings of their children. If they think that the person who was writing those laws didn't keep those laws and then lied about it, well, frankly, that makes his position as leader untenable, doesn't it?
A serving Metropolitan Police officer accused of a series of sex offences has appeared in court to face a further 9 charges. Well, we can find out more. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, is live for us now at Westminster Magistrates Court. Good morning, Mark. What do we know?
Well, PC David Carrick, who's attached to the Met's Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command, first appeared in court in October last year, charged with 1 count of rape against a woman. Then last month, he faced a total of 20 counts against 4 women. Well, today, a further 9 charges have been laid before the court. In total, David Carrick faces 29 charges against 8 women. He appeared from Belmarsh Prison via video link, wearing a grey suit and tie and wearing a COVID mask. He spoke only to confirm his name, his address and his date of birth. He has been remanded back into custody and will appear in court, St Albans Crown Court, on the 28th of this month.
Thank you, Mark. Now, the rollout of smart motorways in England, which uses the hard shoulder as a lane for traffic, has been suspended over safety concerns. The Department for Transport says it's taken the decision following several fatal crashes. New smart motorways will be put on hold until at least 5 years of data is collected. Campaigner Claire Mercer, whose husband was killed on a smart motorway, told GB News she isn't impressed with the new proposals.
They could have easily just flicked a switch and turned the first lane off while they investigate smart motorways for the 25th time in the last 2.5 years. Just pause it. All they've actually promised to do is pause the rollout of new smart motorways, but it's not even all just new smart motorways. It's only ones that aren't substantially completed. So we're still going to have smart motorways opening in the next few years.
Novak Djokovic has admitted breaking COVID isolation rules when he met a journalist after testing positive for the virus. He says he made an error of judgment, saying he wanted to fulfil the long-standing meeting with a reporter. It's as the Australian government is considering whether to deport him following a row over his visa and his vaccination status. The world number 1 also blamed a member of his team for what he called a human error in his travel documents. 500 former teachers have signed up with supply agencies, all as part of a national effort to tackle staffing shortages. Data from the Department of Education shows hundreds of former staff have responded to the call from the Education Secretary to temporarily return to the profession. At the start of term this year, 1 in 12 teachers were absent. Unions say the return of former staff is welcome, but it isn't enough to tackle the challenge caused by the Omicron variant. Now, in international news, NATO will hold talks with Russia in Brussels later today in an effort to defuse tensions over Ukraine. Moscow has amassed around 100,000 troops on the border with its neighbour, but the Kremlin has denied allegations that it's planning to invade the country. NATO officials have suggested they're ready to engage in discussions over a number of issues, but they've warned that some of the demands from Russia are unacceptable. The Prince of Wales has commissioned a series of paintings of Britain's last remaining Holocaust survivors. 7 leading artists will paint the men and women who were once children in concentration camps in ghettos in the Second World War. The Prince says he hopes the portraits will be a lasting reminder of the horrors of the Nazi regime when it's lost to living memory. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to the point.
Yes, morning everyone. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Inaya Falarin Imam. We're on your TV and your radio, so you can take us everywhere. There's no excuse now. We've got a show, of course, for the next hour of all of these top topics. Here's what's on the menu.
Yes, well, the Prime Minister's future hangs in the balance as his own MPs turn on him over partygate. And as he prepares for PMQ showdown this afternoon, with less than an hour to go, we want to know, what would you like to ask the Prime Minister? Get in touch with your views on Twitter or email us.
Yes, indeed, and actually we've had quite a lot of those on, so we'll make sure that we go to those quite soon. Now, this morning, folks, we'll also be going head-to-head, that's right, on the topic of veganism. We've heard reports about people, women in particular anyway, not getting enough protein and dairy. So actually, is the vegan diet good for you? We'll get to the very bottom of that with our two guests.
Yes, and parents of young children have been warned to be on the lookout for signs of spreading winter illness that affects kids. We'll be speaking to a doctor about the symptoms and whether or not masks and isolation have weakened our children's immune system.
Surely not. Surely there's no way that our reaction to this pandemic could have had any long-lasting health consequences whatsoever. Madness. Anyway, we have all of that coming up and much, much more across the programme. And of course, you get in touch with us, GBNews at gbnews.uk.
Well, Boris Johnson is set to face a heated session of Prime Minister's questions this afternoon amid demands for him to say whether he attended a drinks event in the Downing Street garden during lockdown.
Well, despite the allegations that he, his wife and around 40 others socialised in the number 10 garden, Government Minister Michael Ellis said that Boris Johnson's going nowhere.
The Prime Minister's going nowhere. He seeks to draw me into making a supposition about the result of any inquiry. But the Prime Minister retains the confidence of the people of this country, and he did so 2 years ago with the biggest majority in decades.
Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police are facing calls to abandon their current policy of not retrospectively investigating alleged COVID breaches. After all, over 800 people were fined for breaking COVID rules during the same week as the Bring Your Own Booze party.
And that's part of the problem, isn't it, really? I think, really, for a lot of people, whether or not anyone particularly cares about the party itself. Quite a lot you do, don't get me wrong, quite a lot of you don't, it's fair to say. Bit of a mixed bag in the old inbox and online, excuse me. I think it's the fact, isn't it, that simultaneously people were being essentially criminalised for having a cup of coffee in a park.
Well, I think actually if the Prime Minister... I want to find out what everyone else thinks. I mean, if the Prime Minister apologised and said, actually, I'm so sorry, and everybody who has been fined will have their fine either written off or refunded, and can we then move on and focus on policies that actually affect the material lives of people in this country, could he potentially wriggle his way out of it?
And also, who replaces him if he goes? This is another thing people have to consider. You know, people do have to consider who actually replaces Boris Johnson if he goes. Who do you want? Is there anyone out there? And if the answer to that is no, then maybe he should stick around. But anyway, Darren McCaffrey is our GB News political editor, and he joins us now from Westminster. And, it's just under an hour now, isn't it, until the Prime Minister will face a grilling. So what's the latest from where you are, then?
Yeah, indeed, it's going to be a pretty tough Prime Minister's question time. First of all, we know that Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour opposition leader who's been in isolation, Patrick, for the last week or so, has tested negative twice, so he will be at the dispatch box questioning Boris Johnson. I think for the Prime Minister, this is pretty tricky, not least of all because whatever way he seems to answer the question that's going to be posed, poses more difficulties for him, if you like. So what he could do is what Downing Street have done in recent days, which is essentially stonewall and suggest that he is not going to comment on any of the details, including whether he was at this party or not, until Sue Gray releases her investigation. Now, that's likely to anger opposition MPs, but indeed some of his own MPs, many asking, why does it you need an investigator to find out whether you attended a party yourself or not, and that will just drag the story out even more. He could apologise and say he was there, he made a mistake and he got it wrong. However, that opens up questions about whether he or others will face legal investigations about what went wrong, and what also consequences should he and others face for having broken the rules. Or he could essentially try and brazen all this out. I think also what will be notable to look out for is how full the Conservative benches may be or may not be. They weren't yesterday. They were not actually when the Prime Minister was essentially forced to kind of half apologise at the start of December. You may remember lots of MPs didn't bother to turn up. And it is excruciating in some ways listening to Conservative MPs this morning trying to defend the Prime Minister while not really, frankly, having very many facts at their fingertips. And also, I think will be notable is this suggestion, and again, this leads back to the point that if he does have to admit that mistakes were made, he may well have misled Parliament, because he has suggested in the Commons before that no parties were held and that no rules were broken. That may well not be the case. It's going to be a fascinating one, potentially the most interesting one for decades. You will not want to miss it. Live on GB News, of course, from midday.
Absolutely, and you're all over it for us, Darren, which is fantastic stuff. Darren McCaffrey there, of course, reporting from outside Westminster, and it is indeed a big day, ladies and gentlemen. Whether or not you think it should be, it is, and it is going to be gripping stuff. Well, we wanted to find out a bit about what you guys thought, really, the normal man and woman on the street. OK, maybe just the man and woman on the street. But anyway, our GB News North West of England reporter Bradley Harris took to the streets of Manchester to find out how you lot are all feeling about this Downing Street Partygate scandal.
I think, people of that stature need to set examples, and we all know people that have died or people that have attended funerals, unlimited people, and at the time that, they can only go to funerals with 10 people, they're drinking and partying, so, yeah.
I feel like I would have quite liked to have had a garden party, to be honest, but, I didn't. I stayed inside. I think they just need to at least acknowledge it, at the very least, to be honest. Just let everyone know that they realise they shouldn't have probably done that, and a bit of an apology in that sense.
It's disgraceful when people's lost their mums, dads, brothers, sisters through COVID, you know what I mean? And that was the biggest lockdown, the first very big lockdown we had, and he's having throwing parties, you know what I mean? But he's a liar, he's a born liar, he's an hypocrite, isn't he? I mean, why are they having an inquiry? He's broke the law. I mean, the Metropolitan Police should be able to do something about that. Other people's been fined, X amount of money, ordinary people in the streets been fined, but not him. Why not?
I mean, considering that day was my birthday and I didn't even give my own mum a hug on my birthday because we were sort of following the rules, it just makes you feel a bit rubbish about it, really, doesn't it?
I feel like if it's a true statement, if the investigation finds that it was happening, then it's a bit of an outrage. It's a silly thing to do from the government's point of view. People that should be setting an example, and they just haven't been, particularly after the finding out of the Christmas party and stuff as well. So I feel like this should be the last straw now for them.
At the end of the day, people are doing what they're going to do. They're going to do what they want to do anyways, and especially people in power, they do what they want. It's the little people that are forgotten.
That was Bradley Harris, our North West of England reporter, speaking to some members of the public about Partygate, and clearly some very strong and angry views expressed there from the public. Well, let's get a police angle on this now. Peter Kirkham is a former Met detective. Thank you for joining us this morning. Is it at all possible that the Met were unaware of this party going on? I mean, there's police everywhere around Number 10, and many people might be surprised to find out if they didn't know.
We are prone to think of the police as a single entity. So if one police officer knows something, the entire police service, all of them know it. And that's simply nonsense, just as it would be for any other organisation. If you take yourself away from that thought process of thinking of the police like that as this single entity, yes, some police officers probably did know there was a party going on, or they did know there was an event going on. They won't have been privy to exactly what was going on in the garden, what the meeting was about, what the terms and conditions were. And they probably wouldn't be thinking breach of COVID rules. They'd be thinking, this is the sort of thing that happens around here, and we trust the management to be operating in a way that's appropriate. They're not there to enforce COVID rules. And even if they were thinking COVID rules, I've criticised the rules right from the start, is that they are so arcane and constantly changing. It's almost impossible for anybody to know what the situation is or was at any particular time, and what was and wasn't unlawful. And so, yes, police officers maybe would have been aware, individual police officers maybe would have been aware of the existence of this event. I doubt very much whether they would have known very much about it, about the terms and conditions, as it were. And certainly, I don't think any police officer of any rank at any point would have made the connection and said, this is an unlawful party. We're going to do nothing about it. I think if any officer had realised that, they'd have...
Yeah, so you honestly, genuinely, you don't think there's any chance that the police there just thought, look, I'm just going to wave this through, or I'm going to turn a blind eye. This is a room full of, garden full of very powerful people, and I quite like the job that I've got at the moment.
Absolutely no chance whatsoever. I doubt there's even anybody where it crossed their mind, let alone they came to the conclusion. There's lots of things they'd need to know, they simply wouldn't know to understand whether it's legal or illegal.
OK, I think as well, some members of the public, well, I imagine quite a few members of the public, will be a bit miffed, because I think it was on that day, I think there were 800 fines issued to members of the public. And look, I know that you've been critical from the rules from the start, of course you have, and you've been very clear on that. But look, some of these people were fined for things like, drinking a cup of coffee with a mate on a park bench, or just... There was once, I mean, actually one of the worst things I saw was a woman went to take her kid for a walk on the beach somewhere in Merseyside, and police officers telling her to go home and stuff like this. It does look like one rule for one and one rule for the powerful, doesn't it?
I can see how it looks that way, and I can certainly understand how people are angry about what has happened. But again, we look at the police as this single entity. It's down to individual officers the majority of the time, down to individual officers to decide how and when to intervene in any particular situation. And there certainly were examples of officers acting over-enthusiastically, disproportionately, unlawfully. I was critical of them on a number of occasions. There was one incident right at the very beginning where officers in a van saw fit to go around on Shepherd's Bush Green with a megaphone telling people to go home, there's a lockdown, in a similar way you might expect if there was an incoming nuclear attack going to land in half an hour. There have been individual officers acting in inappropriate and excessive ways. But the police service as a whole has not. The vast majority of officers, the vast majority of the time, have dealt with these incidents by way of words of advice and encouragement and explanation, and people have happily complied on that basis, and there's been no need for enforcement. Enforcement has been relatively rare, and like I say, most of it has been proportionate.
Okay. Well, Peter Kirkham, former Met detective, thank you for giving us your thoughts on a lot of the number 10 Partygate saga going on right now.
Cheers, Peter. Right, we're going to delve into the world of my inbox, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a long time coming this today. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And I'm going to go to Judy. Thank you very much, Judy. Who's returning to an issue that we led in the show with, right, which was regarding grooming gangs. And some of the points that I made were about political correctness, in my opinion anyway, getting in the way of grooming gangs being cracked. And Judy also says, it's unbelievable that in 2022, in this abuse is still blamed on the victims, saying that, these girls were asking for, or they were out drinking, they were underage drinking, whatever, that kind of stuff. The justice system needs to be completely thrown out.
I mean, I think it's just completely astonishing that Victorian, archaic, damaging logic is still seemingly embedded in many police force and the criminal justice system in this country. I think it's unbelievable that we still have to say that if someone is a victim of sexual assault or abuse, there is nothing, particularly if they are a child, there's absolutely nothing that they have done. They're not responsible for it. And the only person responsible is the offender. I just think that is sickening. I think it's sickening.
I agree. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, lots of people saying about this, saying that, this is just absolutely disgusting. It's no excuse for criminal gangs to get away with it, and this is part of the major issue anyway for a lot of people. But just on some other topics,
someone's disagreed with one of my views. John Taylor, he says that that asking when I floated the idea that people should get their money back for breaking the fine, he said that if an MP is convicted of a crime or committed a crime, that doesn't mean that all those that committed the crime in general should be let off the hook, and then said that logic doesn't hold. Well, I think that's a fair criticism, but I think, I'm coming from the perspective of someone that thought that the restrictions were absurd in the first place. Yeah. All of these kind of parties and all of this type of stuff was absurd. And so actually, sometimes when the politicians are breaking it, they're actually revealing that they don't necessarily believe in those rules that they're enforcing on everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem. And someone's just been in touch now, Dave, I think it is, to say, well, hang on a minute, if the police weren't there to enforce the rules, the COVID rules and regulations at Downing Street, then who was? And I think that's quite an interesting point, really, isn't it? You know, Dan's been in touch on smart motorways as well. Nothing wrong with these motorways, but plenty wrong with the standard of driving. Driver education is essential when new initiatives are introduced. He goes on to talk about Audi, BMW and other boy racers. Well, I've got a BMW, so I must be a boy racer, am I, Dan? Am I a boy racer, Dan? No, to be fair, like most BMW drivers, my car comes without indicators.
Well,
yeah.
Amongst all the criticism of Boris, Sue Jepson has said Boris needs to stay in his place. He has a job to complete. I'm behind him 100%, but since he took office, he can't seem to do right from doing wrong. The mainstream media are predominantly anti-Boris and always have been. Well, you still have some supporters, Boris.
Yes,
and
got a lot of supporters.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think even though many people have been very critical of him and his premiership so far, he has got a strong supporter base. And even though he doesn't have many allies in the Tory party, I think that's why he's, you know, been championed by them, because fundamentally he wins elections. But the Shropshire by-election might demonstrate otherwise.
Yes, indeed. We're just going to finish where we started when it comes to these views now and go back to the grooming gang issue, because Derek's been in touch, and I think this is a really key point. You may remember that there's a couple of chaps, certainly in parts of the Rochdale grooming gang scandal, who are fighting their deportation, right? And we seem unable to get rid of this lot as it stands. So why have they not been deported? It's because their human rights are more important than these young white girls' lives. And he says, you know, this is a massive, massive problem. You know, how many more of these men are out there? Why can't we deport them? And this is Derek's view, of course.
Just a quick point on that. I mean, this is a thing with Brexit and how, because of COVID and so many other reasons, we have not harnessed what Brexit was meant to mean. I mean, for some people, you know, ardent Brexiteers, we needed to leave the European Court of Human Rights. We needed to scrap the Human Rights Act because it wasn't fit for purpose. And I think that, you know, this is still some of the stringent measures that are in place in a post-Brexit Britain that is keeping us from actually realising the things that people originally voted for Brexit for. And I think these are things that we need to be looking into, whether some of these measures are still actually holding us back from deporting criminals and so on.
Yes, indeed, indeed, indeed. Well, look, coming up, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for all those views, by the way. We do love to hear from you. We've had loads to get through there, and there are loads more, and indeed, they're still coming in, obviously, so please do keep them coming in. GBNews, gbnews.uk. But after the break, doctors are warning of a spreading winter virus affecting children. But not now, winter virus. Should we be worried? We ask a doctor after the weather.
Hello. A sparkling day of winter sunshine for most parts of the UK. It is a little cloudier over northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. And tonight we will again see frost and fog patches forming. Big chunky area of high pressure has moved in, keeping the weather fronts well to the north. Notice though across Scotland the isobars are a little closer together, so it's quite windy here, and that wind is bringing a lot of cloud to western Scotland, patchy rain over the Highlands and the Northern Isles. A bit of cloud too for northwest England, Northern Ireland, but much of eastern England, the Midlands, Wales and the south, dry, fine and sunny. And after a cold and frosty start, temperatures ticking up to around average 7, 8, 9 Celsius. It is milder further north. We could reach 12 Celsius, say, in Aberdeenshire. But we'll keep the patchy rain going across the far northwest through the evening and overnight. Otherwise, it's dry. Clear skies in the south will allow a frost fairly quickly this evening to form. And then later in the night, some dense patches of fog likely over the Midlands, South Wales and particularly parts of southern England. Patchy in nature, but nevertheless could be problematic first thing in the morning. Not so frosty further north, where we'll keep the breeze and we'll keep quite a lot of cloud. That cloud still providing some rain at times over the Highlands, but otherwise a dry day again to come tomorrow. Watch out for that fog in the morning across the south, patchy in nature, but could be quite dense. Should be out of the way by late morning, however, and then it's another generally fine and sunny day across the south. A bit more cloud further north, and again, temperatures getting up to around average, maybe double digits in the southwest. Certainly again, though, mild in the far north, where we'll have, again, breezy and cloudy conditions with some patchy rain. That'll continue into Thursday evening, and again, we do the same with that frost forming quite quickly on Thursday evening, and if anything, some thicker fog patches likely for Friday morning. So the next few days, largely dry, some sunshine, some fog patches and cold mornings, especially so across the south. Bye for now.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome back. It's 11:28 and this is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Falarin Eman, and Patrick Christys. We're live on your TV and your radio this morning.
We are indeed. Now, parents of young children have been warned to be on the lookout for signs of a spreading winter illness that affects children, right? So the British Lung Foundation says that cases of respiratory... Oh, here we go. I've been stitched up here. Respiratory syncytial virus? That'll do. Are surging. And apparently immunity against it is lowered in the population.
Well, joining us now to discuss this is Dr. Lawrence Gellis, a GP operating out of central London. Thank you for joining us this morning. What are the signs and symptoms of this particular virus? And could you actually just tell us how to say it? Because we're struggling here.
It's okay. Good morning, Patrick. Good morning, Anaya. It's a respiratory syncytial virus. Easier to call it RSV. That's the easiest way going forwards. Then you won't get into a mess over it. It's a very common virus. It's been around for a long time. And indeed, we are seeing children with this virus in our practice. Now, the difference between this year and last year is quite stark in that last year, because there had been more stringent lockdown, we were seeing almost no respiratory illnesses at all in adults and children. This year, because we were so locked down, our immunity has weakened, and we're seeing another virus quite separate from COVID that's affecting adults and children. There are lots of cough and cold viruses around, and in many cases, they're causing worse chest symptoms than the new variant of COVID, which doesn't actually go down to your chest. So it is a concern, and it's partly as a result of lockdown that we've lost our immunity, and the children have not been exposed. They've not been exposed to other children. if schools have been closed and even some playgroups. So it's a concern. And I speak as one of the people who always said we shouldn't become a national COVID health service. We should become a national health service for all illnesses. And I'm afraid this is one of the effects of having isolated too much and locked down too much.
Well, this is it, isn't it? Talk to me a bit more about this then. So, actually, our response to the coronavirus, the relentless mask wearing, potentially, the isolation, the lack of exposure for children could actually be damaging towards their health.
Yeah, I mean, OK, it's with hindsight, but we've got to, what are the lessons we've learned from hindsight? And some of us, including myself, were saying this over a year ago. I mean, I signed up to the Great Barrington Declaration, which basically said don't forget the rest of healthcare in trying to pursue a zero COVID strategy. So what we've learned is children and schools were never a hotbed of COVID, and probably the schools should never have closed down. Mask wearing may make a small difference, and certainly in the early days when the more lethal variants were around, they were a good idea. Right now with Omicron, which is so transmissible and so mild, mask wearing is almost certainly a waste of time. The idea of closing down all shops, again, with hindsight, probably a mistake. We should have introduced some form of reasonable social distancing, but let people carry on with their lives as far as possible. So maybe it was right to stop mass gatherings, and it was almost certainly right to stop people having big parties and so on. But I think the rest of the lockdown, with the benefit of hindsight, did more harm than good.
OK. Well, it's interesting points. And so basically, as far as you're concerned now, you know, no more masks and let the kids go out and about, I suppose, is the message.
But Dr. Gellis, you just mentioned that you signed the Great Barrington Declaration, and actually, you know, many different people actually were sounding the alarms of the dangers of some of the policies we've been implementing over the last 18 months. So it's not really the benefit of hindsight, it's the fact that actually debate and discussion on these issues have been shut down over the last year and a half.
Yeah, I mean, I was being kind, actually. For once, I was being non-controversial. You're absolutely right. We were saying it over a year ago. We were saying this is nonsense, and you're absolutely right. We should not have locked down. People weren't listening. Parts of the mainstream media quite enjoyed causing fear and alarm and panic. This was enhanced by the government using them as their messenger to create this fear and alarm. And it really wasn't necessary. And people now you can see people backpedaling furiously, trying to say, oh no, I didn't believe it.
Well, I'm afraid I have to make you backpedal furiously now because we've got to go to our bulletins. But Dr. Lawrence, thank you very, very much. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Dr. Lawrence Gellis there, a GP operating out of central London. But you heard me. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, after the break, we do have a big head-to-head. Is veganism a good thing, or actually, is it really, really unhealthy? Should we encourage a meat-free life, or should we just eat steak all the time? Anyway, find out about all of that after your headlines.
A very good morning to you. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. Boris Johnson will face MPs at Prime Minister's questions shortly as pressure grows for him to say whether he attended a drinks event in the Downing Street garden during lockdown. It will be the Prime Minister's first public appearance since details of the leaking of an email sent by his private secretary inviting 100 staff to bring your own booze to a gathering in the first lockdown. Well, Sir Keir Starmer will return to the Commons today after finishing his COVID isolation. The High Court has ruled the government broke the law by using a so-called VIP lane to award contracts for PPE at the height of the COVID pandemic. Pest Fix and Ianda Capital signed deals worth a total of almost £600 million after being referred to the Department of Health by people they knew. The court ruled it was unfair to give them preferential treatment simply because they were part of the VIP lane. The rollout of smart motorways in England, which uses the hard shoulder as a lane for traffic, has been suspended over safety concerns. The Department for Transport says it's taken the decision following several fatal crashes. No new smart motorways will be created until at least 5 years of data is collected. Novak Djokovic has admitted breaking COVID isolation rules when he met a journalist after testing positive for the virus. The tennis star said he made an error of judgment when he chose to fulfil the long-standing meeting with a reporter. It's as the Australian government consider whether to deport him following a row over his visa and vaccination status. The world number one also blamed a member of his team for what he called a human error in errors in his travel documents. The Prince of Wales has commissioned a series of paintings of Britain's last remaining Holocaust survivors. 7 leading artists will paint the men and women who were once children in concentration camps in the Second World War. The Prince says he hopes the portraits will be a lasting reminder of the horrors of the Nazi regime when it's lost a living memory. You're up to date. I'll be back in later on.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
It's 11:38. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Anaya Falarin-Iman and Patrick Christys. We're live on your TV and your radio this morning.
Yes, indeed. Well, we've all been told that at least once in our lives that we need to get more fruit and veg in our diets, don't we? Surely then the logic follows that the more green stuff you eat, the healthier you'll be. For some people, their dedication to a healthy lifestyle is, however, more restrictive.
Yes, vegans cut out all animal products from their consumption, ditching the beef burgers for plant-based alternatives. But is this really a healthier way to live? And could our obsession with lifestyle changes like veganuary be depriving us of the vitamins we so desperately need?
Well, so today, in our head-to-head, ladies and gentlemen, we'll be asking whether being vegan is actually more healthy. And joining us are Ali Houston, a health coach and food entrepreneur, and Monica Price, a nutritionist. Ali, Monica, thank you very much for coming on. Now, you each have 60 seconds, all right, to state your case, and we'll just have a nice, wider discussion about the whole thing. Ali, I might as well start with you. Actually, no, ladies first. Ladies first. Monica, you go. Your 60 seconds starts now. Is veganism healthy?
Right, well, veganism is all about food and lifestyle. So it's a food and lifestyle choice. So if you're going to go vegan, you're going to be thinking about you don't want to eat any animal products. You're thinking about perhaps the planet, reducing the climate, the deforestation, the pollution, and you simply want a healthier life. So those are the things that normally people look to and think about when they think about going vegan. It can be a very healthy lifestyle, but there's like everything, thing, like every diet, like every food choice you make, there are ups and downs and pros and cons for each of them. But, you know, veganism is, because it's Veganuary, veganism is seen as to be a much healthier lifestyle. And that's simply because the intake of plant-based foods, and lots of fruit, lots of vegetables, is going to be a much healthier part of your diet.
OK, just within your 60 seconds there. Now, Ali, your views, please. Your 60 seconds starts now. Is veganism healthy?
Well, veganism promises to heal humans, the planet, and cease the senseless captivity and death of animals. All sounds great, but I don't believe that veganism really helps much on any of these counts, even though I do believe that vegans almost always have good intentions. And I think we actually share a lot of views. So I subscribe to the logic of paleo, which is that humans evolved over a couple of million years, and we've only really introduced certain foods in the last 10,000 or so. So things like sugar, flour, veg oil, and sometimes dairy can actually be really harmful. And that's something I would have in common with vegans. But there isn't a single traditional society who would all live into really old age if they lived past childhood that didn't eat meat. And this is why I worry. I also think that the planetary health claim is overstated. Greenhouse gases per unit of nutrition just don't really aren't much better with plants than animals. So that's my 60 seconds.
Right, it is. You bang on 60 seconds.
Brilliant.
Someone's got a timer in their room.
well, Monica, I mean, my question is for you, first of all. I mean, you know, a lot of vegans say, well, you know, it's harmful to the animals on the planet. But we know that there's, you know, a lot of the animals that exist right now, cows and chickens, they only exist right now because people are effectively eating them. So actually there'll be way less animals, almost, you know, 10% of the animals that actually exist if human beings weren't keeping them alive for their eventual consumption.
Yeah, I think you've got a good point. I think the problem is that we've got a rising obesity levels in the UK, both in our young and in adults. And it's been known, there's been many studies from the British Heart Foundation, for example, that have told us that eating meat in excess is going to increase your risk of heart disease. And I think what's happened is we've seen a real trend at the moment to go vegan because we're very conscious about our health and we're very conscious about what the foods that we're eating. But, you know, I agree with you in some respects. You know, we have to take a kind of a wider approach to this. We have to say, look, we have a choice here. If we want to choose a vegan diet, then when we really need to be sure that we're aware of what we're actually eating, because with veganism, often you can lack certain vitamins, lack certain nutrients. But equally, if you have a vegan diet, it's been proven to lower your risk of heart disease, for example. So again, it's one of those choices that people make, and often they make perhaps for not looking at all the right reasons to do so. Sometimes it can purely be because they don't want to eat any animal products or any byproducts. But what they're realizing is they need to remember to eat, you know, the nutritious foods to make sure that they are getting all the vitamins and nutrients that their body requires to function.
Yeah, I mean, Ali, veganism has clearly been rising at quite a significant fold over the last few years. Some people, it's because of climate change and environmental concerns. And other people, you know, are thinking actually human beings are developed now. You know, we're not living hand to mouth for survival as our ancestors did for thousands of years. And just as we now live in completely different conditions than before, then it's not really necessary to, you know, kill animals, to harm them, to put them in these very horrible conditions that many of them are in, just solely for our own taste pleasure.
They do taste good, though.
Yeah, the point about animal cruelty is well taken. I think it's something that vegans get right. I think we need to be very careful to have proper regulation, you know, like we do with pet ownership, for example. You know, there's tens of millions of horses that people keep as pets, and we want them to be treated well while they're alive before they die, similarly with cows. So I think from an animal cruelty perspective, we've got a lot to learn from vegans in the debate. I think in terms of evolving how we eat, we have to be careful about that because our bodies just don't evolve at a very rapid rate. You know, we can have epigenetic changes, but our genes really have been programmed over a couple of million years. And so we have to be careful that we give the body what it's evolved to thrive on. And just like was said a moment ago, veganism is by definition short of certain nutrients that you can only really find in abundance in foods from animals.
Yeah.
So from a purely human health perspective, it makes sense to focus as a basis of our diet on well-raised ruminant animals, particularly beef and lamb. And we're very lucky in the UK that 65% of UK farmland is only really useful to grow these brilliant animals on.
That's it, right? And there are people's livelihoods dedicated to this as well, so we can't just eradicate it. I suppose the arguments are they could maybe use land for something else, but it's not a quick fix, is it? Monica, I'm concerned, you hopefully educate the nation. I'm concerned about...
I'll try.
About babies being vegan or children being vegan, toddlers, right? You know, that period is a very, very important period of your life nutritionally, isn't it? And is it right there, do you think, to raise your kid vegan?
Yeah, it's one of those questions that's being asked of me all the time, Patrick. And the thing I say is again, you go back to a choice. The parents have a choice. We all have a choice now as to what diet we have. Personally, I would not recommend a vegan diet for a baby or a child under the age of, say, 2, because it's an important stage of your life, and you're either being breastfed, or you're having milk from a bottle, so you're having formula food, and that's a personal choice. Again, I see arguments on both sides about that. And again, if you look at the studies on both sides will have clear arguments against and for. And it's something, just as Ali said, this is evolving. You know, we haven't been vegan for many, 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 many years. There's always been plants, there's always been the opportunity, but we've always been, as humans, meat eaters. So it's something that we need to really look at and really do some more studies on to make sure that people aren't, especially children, are getting the amount of nutrients that they need. B12 is a classic example of that, Patrick. That's the B12 is commonly lacking, and is something that vegans will not have in their diet because it's naturally found in animal foods and foods from animal products. So that's something that they have to have as an addition to their diet. So, for example, fortified foods, which means that when vitamins are added to the food, so they'll have fortified, say, soya milk or almond milk, or they have fortified cereals, because B12 is essential. And when I say essential, it is essential for red cell production. We have to have it. It's essential for our nervous system, and it's essential for the production of our DNA. So if you have a vegan diet and you choose a vegan diet, it really is a lifestyle choice. You have to be fully aware of what nutrients you're having and those that are lacking from the diet that you choose to have.
Thank you very much. We're going to give the final word now over to Ali, and just ask something quite flippant, actually, Ali. What is your favourite meat?
It's definitely lamb. It's a lovely slow-cooked lamb shoulder. We're so lucky in the UK to have that in abundance. And
making me hungry.
Bit of rosemary.
I would just say that on health and greenhouse gas emissions per unit nutrition and in world hunger, we need animals. There's 1 billion smallholder farmers in the world who rely on it economically and for their food. We have to ask ourselves, who stands to gain financially? Is it the 1 billion smallholders around the world, or is it that plucky band of massive food conglomerates who would like us to think that patented food-like substances made from, sugar, flour, veg oil, and soil-sapping plants is healthy and morally superior food?
Both of you, thank you very much. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you for making this time, for being such good sports as well. Great to have you on the show. Ali Houston there, health coach and food entrepreneur, and Monica Price as well, a nutritionist. Ali, Monica, thank you very, very much. See you soon. All right.
Thank you.
Well, look, we're going to go into our inbox, I think.
Just quickly,
maybe not.
Soya farming, cuts down lots and lots of trees and plants and has a whole host of problems with it. I think we really need to challenge this myth that veganism doesn't come with its own challenges. I think there's a debate to be had whether or not it's better or worse than meat eating, but it also has its own problems too. And I think, no one should feel guilty for eating meat, which is a practice that is across the animal kingdom and also has existed and sustained human development for best part of 250,000 years. And I don't necessarily see it as a problem.
Have you ever gone vegan for a bit?
I did. I was vegetarian for 2 years, and I was vegan for 6 months, and I lost, so much weight as a vegan. Oh. But I did go vegetarian for ethical reasons. Right. But I then realised that actually, I don't necessarily think it's unethical.
But that first bite of meat back after those years out.
Sweltering.
Gosh. Right, OK. Well, so that's it from us here at To The Point, apparently. Is that right already? Oh, gosh. That's it from us, apparently. There you go. But don't go away. There you go. I've got time off. Because Prime Minister's Questions is coming up. Boris Johnson will be there very, very shortly, ladies and gentlemen. But next, it's the briefing with Gloria De Piero. That all ended before it began.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Hello. A sparkling day of winter sunshine for most parts of the UK. It is a little cloudier over northwest England, Northern Ireland and western Scotland. And tonight we will again see frost and fog patches forming. Big chunky area of high pressure has moved in, keeping the weather fronts well to the north. Notice though across Scotland the isobars are a little closer together, so it's quite windy here, and that wind is bringing